Okay, so we got through a couple of churches last time, but I do want to review a couple of things. One is Smyrna. It's the church that Christ had no fault with. Okay, now the other thing, I want to go all the way back. It's John on the island of Patmos. All right, he's been exiled there for preaching and teaching, and he's got so much problems with the Roman government that he ends up exiled. All right, and like I said the first night, he dies for the way some of the apostles dies. This is the equivalent of going to sleep, and you're going to sleep and dying. Right. Right.
The most peaceful of the deaths.
Most of them, right. Some of them have some pretty rough deaths. Okay, now this John, because a lot of raptures will try to say when it says, and I was in the Spirit, that John represents the church at that point, and that's what many people will use to say, okay, this indicates a rapture. It doesn't. It says John clearly was John. There's no article at all for the church there. It's the only article is I, and it's for John. Okay, so that kind of just blows that out of the water, just for what it is. But he's taken through time to the Lord's day, and then when he gets there, he hears a voice behind him. He turns back and looks, and the voice tells him, look back and see these things and write down what you're going to see. We get to some symbology, remember, with the churches. We get some symbols there, and they're going to stay that way all through the book of Revelation. And in fact, all the way back through the Bible, the symbols stay the same. It's cover to cover, the symbology doesn't change. And one of the reasons that the book of Revelation becomes so hard to understand in the age that we live in is because it is a book of symbols. And to understand the book of symbols, you have to understand the rest of the Bible. And many of the churches will tell you just about the book of Revelation that you don't need to know anything about it because you're going to be gone anyway. Okay, and that's a complete lie. So it's important then to kind of nail them where you can. And then this one, candlesticks were churches and stars were angels. Right? And he tells each one of these angels to take these letters to each one of these groups of churches. And that's where we're actually at, and then in the prophecy itself. And we left off chapter 2, verse 12 is where we'll pick it up. All right? We'll start there. And the angel of the church of Pergamos write these things, saith he that hath the sharp sword with the two edges. Now you're going to learn that this sharp sword is Christ's tongue, all right, and it's the sword that cuts. Now the thing that's unique about a two-edged sword is that no matter which way you swing it, it's cutting something. Right, and you got to keep that in mind because it's fair.
Because it can bounce back.
Right. It's fair, but it cuts both ways, and it just kind of much goes for everybody. Yep. That includes churches, that includes people outside the churches, but it is equally fair, just the same. All right? And this is what he says about this church. He says, I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is, and thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith. Even in those days, wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you where Satan dwelleth. Now, there's a lot of voodoo that kind of gets passed around about this, but you can look in the rest of the Bible, you're not going to get another mention for this guy Antipas. This is the only place he's mentioned. I don't know what the Hebrew equivalent to his name is, so I haven't been able to find anything out really about him. But I think what is written gives us a whole lot of information when we stop and break it down. All right. First of all, where Satan dwellest, because John is standing there on the Lord's day and he's looking back. And part of what he's talking about is when the Antichrist appears, he goes right there to Jerusalem. And there's where he declares himself God. And that's what he's talking about, where Satan dwells. So we're talking about Jerusalem at the temple. And now we're talking about a guy named Antipas that was slain among the people there in Jerusalem at the temple. Okay. Now, Antipas is an interesting word because what it means is, let me make sure I got all of this just right on straight. So, Antipas is an interesting word. It's a compound word. It's made up of two. One is anti, which we've already studied when we talk about the Antichrist, which means instead of. That's the first one, and that's 473 in your Strong's Concordance. All right. Now the other one is 3962, and that's patir, all right, which means father. So what it's saying, Antipas, the meaning is instead of father. So Antipas is not a good guy. From that we can think, because just like instead of father, it's like instead of Christ, the Antichrist is the same. So this guy has some very strong. If you had tied up his life, let's just say he has some really bad negatives in his column because his name is instead of father.
Yeah.
All right. But what it says is that he's a martyr. All right. So that means what it really means then is that this guy Antipas has some bad stuff in his history. All right. Maybe stuff he's not even repented of. But when push comes to shove, he was martyred for it. All right. So he chose not.
Yeah.
Right. He chose not to, in our generation, would be bear the mark of the beast. He would have chose to give up his life before he would have bore the mark of the beast. And so that's why this guy who's named Antipas in his church, his church's not doing so great. But you'll find they're not doing so great. But still, this guy named Antifather, when push come to shove, he won't bow. He won't betray God. And because of it, it cost him his life. And so he sits in a very special spot, even though he's a dude more like Nebuchadnezzar than Moses. Okay. I think that's a very interesting sight. So you take that then to this. So when the Antichrist, when Christ appears, all right, it is even written in other places that he's more than willing to give up for sins of the flesh. Is that okay? Just, it doesn't chuck it up to saying that's born of the flesh, but I mean, of those things, he's more than willing, especially with the people that will testify. He's more than willing to forgive those things. So many people feel really like they've done things that they can't be forgiven for, but that's not the case because this dude Antipas, I mean, he's spoken of as being a martyr, and he has some really bad things.
To Genesis and Cain, when he gives Cain and Adam and Eve all these chances, right there shows that he's not.
Out to nuke people, right? That's right. And when you get to really studying the patriarchs of Israel, some of those guys had some major character flaws.
Yeah,
I mean, they really had some problems.
You hear that, right? He's so wrathful, vengeful. It's just
that's right. That's just usually a lot of baloney, often used to just control people. We're going to find out why here in just a minute. All right. But nonetheless, that kind of gets a little bit of an explanation about Antipas, and that doesn't get out into some other boom land. It's just based on what she's actually written. But nonetheless, verse 14. But this is so they've been pretty good up to that point. Come on, they got a martyr, they have patience, they've worked hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast stumbling blocks before the children of Israel, and to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Okay. There's a lot to Balaam, so we're going to have to learn it, because we're going to get another one, the Nicolaitans. Let's just go on another verse, and then we'll go ahead and go back. So hast thou them that hold the doctrines of the Nicolaitans, which I hate. Okay, so we've got two sets of doctrines, and they're both related. Balaam, as best I can determine, the Nicolaitans are just a richer, more opulent version of Balaam. Okay, that's kind of how I get it. That they're more into the extravagance of everything. Right.
Taking of the idols.
Right, and things like that. Yeah. Right. Now Balaam,
which to me sounds orgy-ish.
Okay, well,
so therefore.
Okay, let's address the fornication. The fornication that's spoken of in the Book of Revelations is not among people. All right, fornication in the Book of Revelation is spiritual idolatry, which means.
I know.
Okay. It's spiritual adultery. Idolatry is spiritual adultery, is what I've meant to say, but I got it screwed up. Okay. Yeah. Now, in God's eye, He uses this. This is a really thing you have to really learn this, because this is a theme that He uses all the way through the book. Is His feelings for Israel or His elect as regards as them as a woman. Okay. His bride in the New Testament. We're all the bride of Christ. Male or female has nothing to do with it. We're all the bride of Christ. So that has something to do with it. But anyway, I want to get on Balaam because we can get sidetracked with that. That's a whole nother lecture. But Balaam, let's get into him, which let me get my glasses back on here and see so I can get my notes up here, because I want to make sure. Let me see. White horses. There it is. Doctrines of Babylon. All right. Now, switch over to Numbers, chapter 18, verse 20. Numbers 18:20. So we're going to go. If you're in the website, go to the 2 white horses, and under that you'll find the doctrines of Balaam and Jezebel,
Awesome.
the tab, and that'll pick it up with Numbers 18. Should be right there in front of you. And then let me get this taken care of here real quick and get Numbers 18 up here in my Bible. So, what did I say, verse 20? All right. Now, you cannot understand why God is so upset about this until you understand tithing. Okay, and you have to understand biblically what tithing is, not what it is now.
Today,
What it's not, what it's become, but what it was. Okay, and the way we're going to do that is in Numbers. There's a lot of ways you can back this up. I just chose Numbers here in Deuteronomy, and a place in Exodus, just because of both brevity and how what it just flat says. All right. Now, we spent a little bit of time in the book of Genesis. I want to check something out. Okay, the heave offering. Okay, let's go. I want to make sure I'm in the right spot. Yes, I want to go back up here. No, let's stay right on 20. All right. The tithe. Let's just see what it says about tithing. All right. Yeah, because tithing and the doctrines of Balaam and Nicolaitans all go hand in hand. And verse 20 it says, "And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Thou shalt have no inheritance in the land, and neither shalt thou have any among them. I am thy part and thine inheritance among the children of Israel." Okay, now, he's talking to Aaron. Aaron's the high priest, all right, and he's also a Levite. Now, in the original Exodus at the Passover, God took all the firstborn of Israel. He killed them because Pharaoh would not let them go, all right. And that's the thing that happens that gets Israel
That the lamb
out.
blood thing
Yeah,
and
that's
all
the one
that.
with the lamb's blood on the first
On the
Passover.
doors,
Okay,
yeah.
that was not a give me. Okay, he traded Israel, the firstborn of their lives, for
the
their
freedom.
firstborn. No, for
Oh,
their
for their
firstborn.
Whoa.
For their first
Okay.
fruits.
Yeah.
All right. So his intention was at the Exodus for his priests to be those first fruits, those firstborn out of the children of Israel on the Exodus. Okay, but as usual, Israel messes up pretty bad. All right, and there's this big conflict. And at one point, God tells Moses and Aaron, tell the people who said, all the people that stand with you go over here, and all the people that stand with God and Moses and Aaron come over here and stand. Okay, and at that point, the only ones that went over to Moses and Aaron were the Levites. Moses and Aaron were also Levites themselves. So it's just their tribe.
Yeah.
God was so impressed with that, he said, never mind, you can keep the firstborn. I'm taking the tribe of Levi. Okay, and that's what he's talking about right here. And that's why he's talking to Aaron, because Aaron is not only the head priest, but he's one of the original Levites, okay? And that's what he's telling them. Now, these Levites, when they inherited the land, the Levites had no portion of land allotted to them as priests. They did have a few cities and some areas around the temple where they could graze their cattle and things like that because they had a lot of it, all right? Because you're going to find out that with these first fruits and these tithes all come to the Levite. And that's what he's telling you. You have no inheritance in the land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. No land. The Levites don't own the land, or they don't even lease it. Well, they can lease it, but they can't have actual ownership of it. I am my part, okay? God owns it all. So the little bit of land on a planet somewhere is nothing because everything belongs to him. All the leases come down from him. So it doesn't matter when it comes to the Levite about the land allotment. Now listen to what it says. "And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in the Israel for their inheritance, for their service, which I shall serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation." The tenth here, if you look it up, it actually means a tithe, the tithe. So you're supposed to take the tithe
Take it to the Levites.
and take it to the Levites, okay? You'll find then there's a little bit more to it when we get into Deuteronomy. You'll see the first fruits added into it at the very beginning, all right? But for now, we're just talking about the tithe, the tenth part that belong to God, okay? Now, so he takes that and they give it to the Levites to paying them for service in the temple, okay? Now, you got to realize that's 11 tribes giving to one.
Yeah.
A tenth of
That's
all
a
that
lot.
they have. The tribe of Levi was immensely wealthy.
Wealthy, yeah, I'm sure.
All right,
Especially
immensely.
how he owned it Own land,
right,
stuff like
land,
that.
not only any land, but they can own property, they can own cattle, they can own gold, silver. I mean, so to be a
Ships,
Levite meant that
everything,
you had a pretty good life inside of Israel, right? It wasn't a bad life.
It wasn't a bad life,
Right,
yeah.
right. Now, you have to be a Levite to be a priest. But not every Levite was a priest because you
yeah.
only needed so many to run the temple
Yeah.
and to take care of those things.
Well, you had
but
to
they
have
had a whole
other
tribe,
parts, you know,
right,
other
right, and there were
parts of
other
society,
Levites,
you gotta
right,
stay,
because
you
they
know,
had a lot of cattle to take care of, so there were other
Cattle,
jobs
even-
that had to come up, right?
Animal husbandry to midwife.
Yeah, that's right,
So,
everything, right. All right, verse 20, neither must the children of Israel henceforth come nigh unto the temple of the congregation. I'm talking about the first fruits and the other people that had been working, no more. It's just going to be the Levites,
just the Levites,
right?
you're no longer allowed there.
Right. Least they bear sin and die. That's what it gets out. Verse 23, but the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. That means to today.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want you to hold on to that thought that means to today. And among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance, at least of the land. Now, verse 24, this is where we pick it up. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which thou offer as a heave offering unto the Lord. This is a lot like, heave offering was a lot like the difference between what Cain offered and what Abel offered. Abel offered a sin offering because it was his first fruits, right? And it was a blood sacrifice but Cain was supposed to offer first fruits.
But he ate
didn't. He ate them or whatever, right?
Whatever he did.
And that was supposed to be a love offering or the heave offering, okay? So that kind of plays in there, and that was part of the background I wanted to actually lay with you just a little bit so you'd understand that as soon as I said it, all right? Now, Israel and their inheritance, verse 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, when you take of the children of Israel the tithes, which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then ye shall offer up a heave offering unto the Lord, a heave offering of it unto the Lord, even the 10th part of the tithe. Okay, now you're going to find out what that has to do. Now, the Levites, so I'll go one more verse. I wasn't planning to, but I want to explain it. And this your heave offering shall be reckoned unto you as though it were of the corn of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. So he's just saying when a Levite receives the tithe, he counts that as it's corn or wine, and that's how he keeps track of what he pays for his own
for his
personal, right,
yeah,
for his part, right. And that's it. But nonetheless, now you see how the tithe was laid out. Now in Deuteronomy, we're going to get just a little bit more about it, all right? But you begin to see then that the tithe, what God wanted the tithe to do, well, you're going to find out what God wanted the tithe to do. Let's just let him speak about it then. Let's just go there. Deuteronomy chapter 26 for verse 11 is what I want to go to next.
Okay.
Deuteronomy
Okay.
chapter 26. And we're going to pick it up somewhere around 11, verse 11. 26, 11, but I think I'm going to go back one or two more. Yes, I actually do right there. That's where it is. We're going to go back to 9. We're going to pick it up in 9. All right, we're still on the same subject. We're still talking about tithing and then what the responsibilities, where the tithe went and what was done with it, okay? And now we're going to begin to form an idea a little bit more about why God is so ticked about this tithe. All right. Verse 9 of chapter 26 of Deuteronomy. And he that brought us unto this place and hath given us land, even a land that floweth with milk and honey. And now, behold, I've brought the first fruits of the land which thou, O Lord, hast given me.
We're closed, guys. We're just having a Bible study. We close in 2.
I'm sorry. Let's see what they did here. All right, where were we? Okay. Verse 10. And now, behold, I have brought the first fruits of the land which thou, O Lord, hast given me. Okay, first fruits. Now we're keying off of Abel's sacrifice. The same thing as him. So they're talking about a proper sacrifice, okay? And thou shalt set it before the Lord thy God and worship before the Lord thy God. Now, this first fruits, these are where the sacrifices started to come out of, okay? Now, your first fruits, the requirements of law that they can't have any malformation. They have to be the best of the flock. They can't have any deformity of any type. And that's how they determined which first fruits were actually adequate for sacrifice. Now, there's a lot that's not understood about sacrifice commonly in Christianity, and everybody thinks of a sacrifice as a whole burnt offering. But there were only 7 whole burnt offerings, all right? Most of the time when something was sacrificed, it was portioned. God got a portion, which was mostly just something called the maw. God says, I love the fat of the lamb when he loves the smell. He likes the way it smells. So offer that to him was what he wanted. But that's called the maw, and it's just like the skin and the legs and the maw, and it burns really good and really hot.
With fat on it.
Yeah, with all the fat on it. And that's the part that was generally burnt, that was offered. It's almost waste in reality, but the fat, he likes fat and tells you not to eat the fat anyway. It's not good for you to consume too much fat. It's just a dumb one in our culture. We know
it's
this
just science. Yeah.
That's right. But nonetheless, but what actually happened was that a portion of that went to the priest.
Yeah.
That was performing the sacrifice. A portion of it went to the person and offered it because it's a sacrificial meal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are to partake as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there are rules what that priest can do, because that priest may do 500 sacrifices in one day, and whatever his portion is, he can do what he wants with it. It's his business.
Wants to donate it, if he
That's
wants
right.
to
Right.
keep it for himself and
So
consume it,
a lot of
doesn't
them
matter.
would open butcher shops and sell it.
Yeah,
Right.
why
There was
wouldn't
no
you?
law right there for him, and
I'm
they
sure
could.
there was a few of them that were considered saints that just
And
gave it to the
there was
poor.
there was a lot of them that would have too,
Yeah.
right? Because they had plenty.
That's their place
right.
in life, is
And
to
that
do
was
that.
exactly the way it was supposed to
Yeah.
go. Right. All right, now verse 11, and thou shalt rejoice in every good thing which the Lord thy God hath given unto thee, and unto thine house, thou and the Levites and the stranger that is among you. All right. Here are the Levites, then the stranger. Now the stranger was just like a poor person. They were to be taught fairly under the law. You were not allowed to use different weights and measures with the stranger than with your friend or your family member. Right. It had to be fair, and it said it was inequitable across the boards. So you weren't allowed to persecute them. Now a stranger means somebody from another country. But if a stranger came into Israel and they converted and began to follow God, then they were no longer a stranger and they were considered a brother, right? And that it was illegal for you to discriminate against them in any way other than that, because as a brother you get some benefits that a stranger doesn't have. Okay? And that's just the way every culture works, okay? But it was written into their law. Nonetheless. Verse 12, and when thou hast made an end of the tithing, all right, and all the tithes of thine increase the 3rd year, which is the year of tithing, and hast given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and they may eat within thy gates and be filled. Okay, now here we have the 3rd year tithe. Every 3 years you took that tithe, gave it to the Levites, and it encompassed everybody, not just the Levite and the stranger, right? This was everything, and this would have been so much wealth coming in, all right, that we're talking about mass storehouses of food. We're talking about, a lot of those public works that we have and the government. These people would have been taken care of with these funds that were coming into Israel. I mean, it was immense, and the infrastructure that was needed to govern that big of a culture was just absurd. As with any culture that size, right. But nonetheless, there you got your 3rd year tithe, all right? But it still went to the same place. Went to the Levites, and they had really strict duties what they had to do with it, right? Verse 13, and when thou shalt say before the Lord thy God, I have brought away the hallowed things out of mine house. Now, a hallowed thing is anything that you've dedicated to the Lord, to God. It would have been part of the tithes and the alms and stuff. You would have took that dedicated thing and took it and presented it at the table. And it could have been something. Maybe you were a woodworker and you built a magnificent table. You would take that and offer it at the temple, right, as part of it, right. And that would have been one of those things. But where was hallowed thing there? And also have given them unto the Levite and to the stranger, and to the fathers and to the widow, according to all the commandments which thou hast commanded me. I have not transgressed thy commandments, neither have I forgotten them. Okay? And that's a real big, important thing to remember that this is all about tithing. We've done nothing but study where the tithe was, what it was, who it went to, and what it was responsible for. Okay? Because this, it turns out, I think, is what the heart of the doctrines of Balaam and the Nicolaitans. Okay? And even Jezebel to a great degree, which we'll study next week. All right. But nonetheless, you get the idea. Now, so let's find out what God really thinks about somebody stealing from him. All right? Because really, what's going on now, what you see in the church before we get on this, and you're going to find out, I didn't say this is written about here right now. All right? But what you see is you see a battle among churches for your money. Okay? And this is just the truth. You walk in, you sit down, and one of the first things they do is pass the plate. Now, I know what it's like to not have any money, to have kids, you need shoes. I know what it's like to raise a kid on hope and no money. I mean, I've been a part of it for a long time, so I understand. And you go to what's supposed to be a house of God where you want to feel welcome and appreciated, and you sit down in the chair the first time broke, and they pass the plate, and that's fine, okay? You don't have no money, you don't put nothing in the first time, and they pass the plate, no problem. But then, 10 minutes later, dang it, they're going to pass that thing again.
Right
and 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I'm still just as broke as I was the first time I sat down, okay? Don't have no damn money. Yeah, God knows that, all right? You kind of keep that in mind. And now I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to go to Malachi. Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. Malachi, right. And I'll show you exactly where in just a second. Malachi, and this is some of the stuff I've been working on since the last time we were here. All right, we're going to pick it up in verse 5. Hold on a second, let me find out. Yeah, chapter 3, verse 5, I'm sorry. Chapter 3, verse 5. All right. We're going to find out how God feels and how he feels he is being robbed. Okay, and it's going to be straight out of the Bibles. Well, I'm going to need them. I need to do this. I can't see. Yes, last book of the Old Testament. So find Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and go back one. Well, while she's trying to get that, I'll go ahead and talk about it. So we're going to find out how God feels about this, all right? Now, what I want to tell you about Malachi is out of a group of prophets called the minor prophets. Okay. Now, when they say minor prophets, it doesn't mean that the prophecy's less inspired. It just means like lesser is in Greek. It's a numerical thing. It's minor because they're not as big, but they're still just as inspired. And all of them are about the last days, the generations from 1948 forward for us. Okay. So, and all of them are about that, and keep that in mind, because here in Malachi, you're going to find out why he is so ticked. I need my glasses back, baby. You can just listen, and I got a recording, so makes it easy. Malachi chapter 3, verse 5, all right? And I will come near to you and to judge, and this happens, when Christ, at the second advent, is what we're talking about. And I will be I will be a swift witness against the sorcerer and against the adulterer and against the false swearer and against those that oppress the hireling for his wages. Yeah, that's one that everybody wants to talk about, adultery. Okay, first of all, the adultery. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the sorcery. The sorcery could be any kind of craziness, including the ultimate sorcery, which is worshiping the Antichrist. And that's the sorcery he's talking about. Remember, these are about us, and this is about the time when the Antichrist actually reigns, okay? So that's what that sorcery is, and the adultery is the same thing. It's not physical adultery. It's spiritual adultery, right? It's idolatry, which is spiritual infidelity, is a good way to put it. Okay? the false swearers, those people that are swearing Christ has returned, Christ is here. But what's the Bible say? No matter what they say, don't believe them. He's not here.
You'll know.
You'll know, right? You ain't missing it. It won't be a secret. There will be, everyone will know. But those that oppress the hireling and his wages, well, think about how many times have you heard this argument in our culture about we can't raise the standard, we can't raise the minimum wage because that'll make prices go up, and then that won't be good for anybody. But that's exactly what they're talking about. Right. They're talking about repressing the wage, so you're working yourself to death for nothing, just to pay rent, to pay somebody else's house. And I've been there, I know. I'm praising God. I bought a trailer a long time ago, and it just got paid off. And for the last 2 years, I have not had to. It's just wow, you know what a difference it makes. Oh, yeah. Right. But nonetheless, but listen what it says about, and the widow and the fatherless, and they turn aside the stranger from his right hand. That means in their gates where they're supposed to feed him, and their judgment actually occurs. Yeah, they're pushing them away from those things that the Levite is supposed to take care of with their tithe. All right, the widow and the fatherless, and they turn aside the stranger from the right. And fear not me, saith the Lord of hosts. They're not a bit afraid of God when they say those things, when they do those things. But most of all, they don't know this Old Testament, because if they knew what was getting ready to tell them, they'd have a different thought about it. Verse 6, for I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. He's always had a soft spot for Israel. Okay, and the sons of Jacob, that's the 12 patriarchs of Israel. Okay, when you see sons of Jacob, that means both houses, both Israel and Judah, which you know a little bit about anyway. All right, verse 7, even from the days of your father, ye are gone away from mine ordinances, the same thing he said, please keep, all right, and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I will return unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. But you say, where shall we return? What are we going to return to? Okay, they have no idea. All right, verse 8, will a man rob God? Can you? Not without him knowing. Okay, yet ye have robbed me. He's talking about the churches now right here. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? They say, what have we robbed you of? What does he say? In the tithes and in the offerings. Okay, so that's where God feels like he's being ripped off, in the tithes and the offerings. Because when they take in the tithes and the offerings, the primary responsibility was the stranger. Yeah. Well, for now it's the stranger. Because we don't know where the Levites are. So the only thing that remains out of that then is the stranger and the widow and the orphan. All right, and so he's saying there that when they gather these tithes, they're stealing my money.
You don't get that 10%.
Right. That's not your 10. You're not a Levite, and you're not taking care of that.
When it's not
that's
yours.
Not yours. It's not your money. That is what theft is, right? That money belongs to the Levite, who was supposed to take care of the fatherless and the widow, and the stranger that was among them. So he's just flat ticked about it. What's he say next? Ye are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. So that's us. All right? That's us. He's ticked about it. And so that's why at the second advent, look, in the book of Revelation, there are 2 tribulation periods. The first one was Antichrist. It lasts 5 months long. The second one is from the Messiah himself, and it doesn't last 10 minutes. All right? And it's taken care of. So he's kind of irritated with the way things are going when it comes to tithing. Now, they're not taking care of the widow and the poor. Now, I wanted to go ahead and tell you, I'll just read this to you so you can, you probably got it, right? It's Exodus 22. 22. Ye shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. Now, think about what they're supposed to do with their tithe. Now, listen to what he says about it. If thou afflict them in any way, and they cry unto me, I will surely hear their cry. Verse 24, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Okay, and your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. All right, so there is a price to pay for ripping off the widow and the orphan. All right, and that price that we were supposed to pay was the tithe. And that's not occurring. And you can walk into any management meeting in any church and keep this in mind, and you will be very clear then in your mind that this is exactly true. Okay? It doesn't get any more true. All right? And these are what's at the heart of the doctrines of Balaam. Now, we're probably going to stop right there for tonight. Now, next week we're going to pick it back up, and we're going to go to Numbers, all right? Because it's in the book of Numbers is where Balaam's mentioned the first time. And we're just going to study Balaam a little bit, and we're going to see what it actually says about him. But know where we are now in that. We're in the doctrines of Balaam. This is the accusation the church of Pergamus is that, no, it's not an accusation, it's a fact because it comes from God. He looks at it and says, you contain the doctrines of Balaam and the Nicolaitans, but you have some that were like Antipas, that in the end, they might have screwed up a lot, but in the end, they drew a line and they were willing to pay the price for it, right? And that stands good with God. He'll give a law over that.
I think that would probably stand more.
That's right. Because in the end, you put your. That's right. And then not. Right.
Because it shows that they took a conscious effort to think about what they were
doing. That's right. Push come to shove. Yeah. That's what it is. But now we're starting to really get into the nitty gritty about the book of Revelation and things that we need to pull out of it. Okay. And one of these things then is the doctrines of Balaam. Another big one in the next church, we're going to have to, it might take us a couple times to get to it, but we're going to have to study a little bit about a girl named Jezebel. Now, there's a lot of voodoo passed around about both Balaam and Jezebel. Okay, now, and Jezebel's not the most savory character, but most of the times when Jezebel is referred to with men, they're referring to her sexual exploits.
Good.
All right, but Jezebel has a doctrinal set. It wasn't just about her. They want to make it be just about that, but it's not. Jezebel is a very crafty individual, and she's very slick, and she rages war against the prophets of God in Israel. Legally does it.
Oh,
It's, she marries a king, she seduces a king, uses her feminine wiles to control him to every degree, and then